The Great Migration, a journey toward freedom and opportunity introduction. The Great Migration, one of the most significant demographic shifts in American history, saw over 6 million African Americans leave the rural South for urban centers in the North, Midwest, and West between 1916 and 1970. This mass movement was fueled by the promise of economic opportunity, education, and an escape from the racial violence and oppression of the Jim Crow South. More than a relocation of people, the Great Migration transformed American culture, politics, and society, reshaping the African American experience in profound ways. The roots of the migration. The seeds of the Great Migration were sown in the aftermath of the Civil War. The end of slavery in 1865 did not bring equality or freedom from racial oppression for African Americans. The Reconstruction era briefly offered political and social gains, but these were swiftly reversed during the rise of the Jim Crow era, which codified racial segregation and disenfranchisement in the South. Violence against African Americans was rampant. Lynching, mob attacks, and systemic discrimination created a climate of fear and oppression. By the early 20th century, many African Americans viewed migration as a means of survival and liberation. The promise of industrial jobs in the North, spurred by World War I, provided a powerful incentive to leave the South. Push and pull factors. The factors driving the Great Migration can be divided into push and pull elements. Push factors. Economic hardship. African Americans in the South were largely relegated to sharecropping and tenant farming, systems that trapped them in cycles of debt and poverty. Racial violence. The threat of lynching, discriminatory laws, and the daily indignities of segregation pushed many to seek safety elsewhere. Disenfranchisement. African Americans were systematically denied the right to vote through poll taxes, literacy tests, and intimidation. Pull factors. Industrial jobs. Northern cities offered factory jobs in steel mills, railroads, and manufacturing plants, especially during wartime labor shortages. Education opportunities. Northern states provided better access to education for African American children. Community and cultural life. Cities promised a vibrant cultural scene and the potential for political activism and civic engagement. The first wave, 1916, 1940, the first wave of the Great Migration, from 1916 to 1940, coincided with World War I and the interwar years. Northern industries faced labor shortages as white men were drafted into the military. African Americans were recruited to fill the gaps, lured by the promise of higher wages and better living conditions. The migration gained momentum during the war. Between 1916 and 1918, approximately 500,000 African Americans moved north. Several major cities became key destinations. However, life in the North was not without challenges. Challenges in the North. While the North offered economic opportunities, African Americans encountered discrimination and segregation in housing, education, and employment. Northern cities practiced de facto segregation, confining black residents to overcrowded and underfunded neighborhoods. The influx of African Americans also triggered racial tensions. White workers, particularly recent European immigrants, viewed black migrants as competition for jobs and housing. These tensions erupted into violence, most notably during the Red Summer of 1919, when race riots broke out in multiple cities across the nation. Despite these challenges, African Americans built thriving communities, establishing churches, businesses, and cultural institutions. One neighborhood in New York City emerged as a cultural capital, giving rise to a flourishing of African American art, music, and literature. The second wave, 1941, 1970. The second wave of the Great Migration began during World War II and continued through the civil rights movement of the 1960s. The war effort created another labor shortage, and industries again turned to African American workers. This time, the migration extended beyond the North to include the West, with several West Coast cities becoming major destinations. African Americans found jobs in shipyards, aircraft factories, and other wartime industries. However, they continued to face discrimination. The struggle for fair employment led to activism, including a major movement that pressured the federal government to ban discrimination in defense industries. The second wave also coincided with the rise of the civil rights movement, as African Americans in the North and West organized for equality in housing, education, and employment. The migration helped shift the political landscape, increasing African American influence in urban centers and shaping the trajectory of the fight for civil rights. Cultural impact. The Great Migration profoundly influenced American culture. In cities across the country, African Americans created vibrant cultural expressions that reshaped music, literature, and art. Music. Jazz and blues, rooted in the South, found new audiences in northern cities. Many influential musicians became household names, bringing African American culture to the forefront of American entertainment. Literature. Writers explored the complexities of migration, identity, and race in their works, helping define a new era of African American literature, art, and film. Visual artists documented the migration experience, while films began to reflect the realities of African American life. The migration also gave rise to Black-owned businesses, newspapers, and organizations, fostering a sense of pride and self-determination within the African American community. Political impact. The Great Migration transformed the political landscape of the United States. As African Americans moved to urban centers, they became an increasingly influential voting bloc, shifting political power. In northern cities, African Americans gained political representation and formed alliances with labor unions and progressive movements. Civil rights, activism. The migration helped fuel the civil rights movement, as urban communities became centers of activism. Influential civil rights leaders emerged from these environments, advocating for systemic change, economic contributions. African Americans contributed significantly to the labor force, shaping the industrial and economic development of the nation. Legacy and reflection. The Great Migration reshaped the African American experience, creating opportunities for economic advancement, education, and cultural expression. However, it also highlighted the persistent challenges of racism and inequality in America. The migration's legacy can be seen in the vibrant Black communities that continue to shape American culture and politics. From influential music movements to modern activism, the echoes of the Great Migration are still felt today. Conclusion. The Great Migration was a transformative chapter in American history, marking a bold step toward freedom and opportunity for millions of African Americans. It was a journey of hope and resilience, reflecting the enduring struggle for justice and equality. As we reflect on this historic movement, we are reminded of the power of determination and the enduring quest for a better future. The Great Migration was not just a movement of people. It was a redefinition of what it means to be free, forging a legacy that continues to inspire generations.